Okay, welcome back to the Techmoto channel and our next video in the Arduino series, which is looking at how to attach switches to an Arduino and program a piece of code. So for this video, you're going to need your Arduino Uno. You're going to need a breadboard. You'll need an LED of some description, a switch. Doesn't really matter what type of switch you're going to use. If you're unsure about different types of switch, you can go to the Techmoto video on switches. I'll put the link in the corner of the video. You'll need 3 jumper cables and you'll need 2 resistors. Now, one of those resistors doesn't really matter what value it is, but the other one needs to be a suitable resistor for protecting an LED. So I've got a 330 ohm resistor here, which is orange, brown. So once you've got those components together, we'll get started. So as with all electronic circuits, there are 3 different stages. There's an input, a process, and an output. Now in this circuit we're going to build today, our input is obviously the switch, the process is going to be the program that's held on the Arduino, and the output is going to be an LED that lights up. So we're going to break that down into 3 separate components, and we're going to start with our input. Okay, so we're going to use this simple push button switch here, which is a push to make. And we're just going to put that in our breadboard here like this. There we go, nice and solid. The first thing we're going to do is put in our pull-up resistor, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We put that on one side of our switch, and we take that off to 5 volts. So that's connected to 5 volts. We're then going to take a negative line from the other side of our switch to GND. Now there are 3 GND ports on your Arduino Uno. Doesn't matter which one you use. This resistor keeps pulling out of the 5 volt port. Okay, and then we're going to take a wire from the same place that your resistor and your switch plug into the breadboard off to pin 2. Now we're going to use pin 2 because it's one of our digital input-output pins of our Arduino. And that's you set up, that's your input, all sorted and ready to go. So now let's talk about this resistor and why it's here. The pins on the Arduino board need to either be positive or negative. There needs to be a 1 or a 0, on or off. There's no sort of in between. It needs to go to negative to switch. So when we have our switch here, we've got our pin here, pin 2, coming down this line here, through the switch, and then back to negative. So when I press this button, I'm effectively connecting pin 2 to the negative every time I press that switch. Now the problem is that when that switch is not pressed, is that pin, that IO pin, either positive or negative? Well, it's neither, because it's not actually plugged into anything. So if I press it, it's definitely negative. If I release it, well, what is it? Well, that's why this resistor is here, because when it's released, pin 2 comes down here, then it goes through the resistor to the positive. So right now, through here, through the resistor to positive, it is a positive signal, but there's a resistance on here. When I press the button, it becomes more negative than positive because there's a resistor on the positive line. Does that make sense? So whilst the button is pressed, there's a direct line to negative. When it's released, there's a direct line to positive, but through the resistor. Now, the circuit would work without the resistor in place, but what you'd end up with is an intermittent signal, and you'd end up with your circuit failing every now and again, or doing some pretty random stuff. So it's a good idea to have a pull-up resistor in there. It doesn't really matter what value that resistor is. So I've got a 1K in there, it could be a 5K, it could be a 10K, as long as when that button isn't pressed, it's connected to the positive in some way. So you have a defined signal at this point of the Arduino. Okay, so that's our input sorted out. Our process is going to be done on the programming language. And what we need to do now is just put an output in. Now I could put the output onto the same breadboard, but just to make it easier to see, I'm going to use a second breadboard. And it's exactly the same as the last video. We're going to take a cable from our ground or GND on our Arduino and bring it over to anywhere on our breadboard like that. And I'm going to use pin 10 as our output, and I'm going to bring that over to our Arduino board like that. And then we take our LED, making sure the long leg goes towards the positive, and we're going to put it in there like that. We now have our input, process, output. So we're going to jump into the software and see how we program it. Okay, so same as before, I'm going to put up the video of our circuit on the right hand side of our screen here so you can see what's going on. And we're now in our Arduino IDE. So we're going to go to the File menu, Examples, Digital this time, and Button. And just maximize that so we can see the whole program. Now again at the top here you've got a description of your circuit. That's grayed out, so that's a comment. We've got a few new bits in here that I want to introduce you to. So constants we introduced in the last video for our LED pin, so we could change the LED pin. But we also have another one in here which is button pin. Now this is exactly the same as it was in the last video. You can put any name in here you want to. So this is going to be our LED, this is going to be our button. Now on our circuit I made our output pin 10, so I'm just going to change that. Now we have a new one here which is a global variable. It says int button state equals 0. So what we're saying here is that when this program kicks off, when it starts up and it runs through for the first time, it's setting the button state to 0. Come down to void setup. There's our LED pin that you've seen in the last video, but we've got a new one now which is pin mode, button pin, input. So if we're saying we've got a button plugged into pin 2 and that is an input. Then we come down to our program. And it says button state equals digital read button pin. So what it's doing there is it's checking pin 2 on your Arduino and it's seeing if it's high or low. So is it a 1, is it a 0, is it on or off? And then it comes down into your program and it says, well, depending on what this value is, I want you to do the following. So if button state equals high, turn LED on. Else, turn LED off. Now our circuit at the moment, because I haven't pushed the button and going through the pull-up resistor is making it high. So if button state equals high, turn LED on. So you can see there that the LED is on. If I press the button, it would go to else and it would turn the LED off. So if I come in here and I press this button, it turns the LED off. Okay, so now let's change a few things and see how it works. So this is reading our digital pin, which is pin 2. It's saying if the button state is high, turn the LED on. Well, now we're going to change it so that it goes the other way round. So I'm just going to change my comment here so I know what's going on. And then I'm going to remove the word high here. Now, interestingly, if I just write low in here, can you see how that is black? Doesn't turn to that sort of blue turquoisey colour. And it's because I haven't put them in capitals. So capital letters, low, and it changes colour. If you put them in lowercase, it doesn't work. It has to be uppercase. In the same way, I'm going to change this to high. And I'm also going to change my comment there so I know what's going on. So I've basically just made it backwards. So I'm going to verify that. And you get a little progress bar down here that says it's okay. And then I'm going to send it to my circuit board and the light should go off. So now when I press the button, when it goes high, it's off. And when it goes low, it's on. Okay, so just like in the last video, we changed the code slightly to make it do a few different things. We can do the same thing here. So actually in your program, you can put anything you like down here. So when our LED is on at the moment, it's just turning on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra piece of code in here, which turns it on, waits for 1 second, and then I'm going to say go low, wait 1 second. So that's going to make it flash. So we hit the verify button, checks that the program is okay, send it to the circuit, flashes to say that it's got the program, and now when I press this button, it flashes. And when I let go of the button, it stops. Now once you can control inputs and outputs and you have your program here, you can do pretty much anything you like. So I just wanted to show an example of what else you could do. So I've just added in another output here and I've called it LED pin 2, just like I did in the last video. I've left the input the same. All of this is the same, but all I've done down here is I've added in an extra line saying when the state is high, turn LED pin, so the original light, low, and a second light high. Else, turn on the original light high and our second light low. And if I just tick that off and hit the button here, you'll see that I've set up a new circuit with 2 LEDs on it. And when I press this button now, it just swaps to the other light. And so really the only thing that's holding you back is your imagination. You can add in as many lights as you like, you can add in as many switches as you like, and you can make it do pretty much anything. So you've just opened up projects on Christmas lights, fairy lights, bicycle lights, lights in your house, lamps, all sorts of stuff. There's a whole load of projects you can do with just a simple circuit like this. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'm going to call it a day there. Slightly more complex than the last one, but still relatively simple once you get the hang of it. If you get stuck or you're unsure where the wires go, all you need to do is go to Google and just type in Arduino switch, and you'll end up with a whole load of resources showing you where to put the wires onto a breadboard and so on. I hope that helped you. Again, put any questions in the comments and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one.